Okay, Cameron Crowe and Fred Crowe, father and son duo. First parent to do a recorded interview about Cole Valley. He's a brave, brave soul. So before we get going, if this is the first video you've watched and you might not know the context, I wrote a blog post and posted it. Time's flying; it's hard to keep track. About 3 weeks ago, I guess, and it's blown up. It's been viewed about 5,000 times. It's been shared dozens of times at least, not just around Boise, Idaho, and Cole Valley in this area, but across the country and in like Christian school circles. So this has started a big discussion, and basically what this was all about is my experience, what I remembered from Cole Valley, and how when I left, I loved it. And then as I got farther and farther away from it, my memories started changing to the point where everything that I remembered really disturbed me. And I thought there were big problems with the way I was raised in this school. And I felt like people needed to hear that message. So if you felt the same way I do, that you're not crazy and you're not alone. And then two, if you're a prospective parent, you should have this view in mind when you decide whether or not you're going to put your kid in this school. So the reaction was immediate and intense. So my phone was blowing up nonstop for weeks. And after about 30 people messaged me individually and said, "Oh my God, thank you for writing that. I've thought that for a long time, but I didn't know anybody else felt that way. Here's what happened to me." And I was just blown away, and I realized there needed to be a place for people to talk about this that wasn't just me. So we made a support group on Facebook. There's over 100 people in it now, telling stories, insane stories, stories that I might not have even believed, even when I posted this blog post. But there's been so many accounts now, it's you can't ignore it. Stories of rape, attempted suicide, abuses of all kinds. And so this has turned into a bigger thing. We now have a website called ColeValleySpeaks.com for all the public content that's kind of being generated by this movement. Interviews on here with different people, students, and now parents, thanks to Fred. And this is where basically everything that we're doing is going to be. There's a link to the support group here if you want to join it. And there's a link to be interviewed for the documentary. We're going to make a documentary. So a big thing. Anyway, all that said, that's the context. Fred, why did you want to, yes, and if anybody thinks it's weird that I refer to my dad as Fred, you're going to have to get over that. That's how we address each other. He doesn't address me as Fred, but that's how I do. So why are we having an interview, Dad?
So we talked about it, and we thought it would be beneficial for you to get as many perspectives on this topic that you've raised as possible, as far as you've had young women that were students in the past, young men that were students in the past, and I could give a different perspective as far as a parent that has sent to children in the past that have graduated.
Yep, exactly.
And I thought I could start off with how I and your mother chose to start you at Cole Valley in kindergarten. Turns out reactions.
That was when? What year was that? That would have been 95-ish?
94.
94. Okay.
And even prior to that, you had attended 2 years of Christian preschool.
Yep, that was, what's it called?
Beavis, Boise Valley Seventh-day Adventist here in Boise.
Yep.
And then the earlier than that, we had lived in Cincinnati when you were first born. So you had 1 year of preschool there in Cincinnati, the second one here in Boise.
Mm-hmm.
But also too, add context, I currently attend Cole Community Church. And when I was growing up, I grew up in a Christian home. But our church that we attended was in a different school district. So at school, it turns out that I didn't have any Christian friends. And thinking back, I was thinking that if I had had Christian friends, it would have been more likely that I would have gotten into less trouble than I got into growing up. So I thought that that would be a benefit. Also, as far as being a first-time parent and thinking about family issues and being a Christian at the time. At the time, your mother...
You're still not a Christian.
Correct.
So not just that, yeah, just wanted to clarify that because I think it's good to know that Christians can have issues with Cole Valley. You know, if you have some sort of a criticism with something about Cole Valley, that doesn't make you a bad Christian, and you have a lot of support for you. You know, I just want to get that out of the way. You weren't a Christian then, and you're not now. You're still a Christian.
Got it. But at the time when you were getting to the age of starting school, your mother and I both had the perspective that we thought that the Christian life is the best life to live. There's a lot of benefits to it, and I still feel that way. And then thinking back about how, with my family growing up, essentially Christian issues were pretty much confined to Sunday, and then being in a public school Monday through Friday, and then Saturday in the neighborhood. Christianity was pretty much compartmentalized to Sunday, but didn't flow into the rest of the week. And I thought that that would be a benefit for our children to integrate Christian life in church, which I value highly, across the week, rather than just being siloed on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also thought about, and me in particular, that I felt that there was a better chance that you could graduate from high school as a virgin, sober, with no police record in a Christian environment than in a public environment. So that's how we got started on that.
But you wanted to put me in a bubble.
Correct. Because I wasn't in a bubble growing up, and it had a negative impact on me. So it was a idea to try to make an improvement with my own children. And I guess that's kind of funny the way life works, I guess. As far as you go from generation to generation, you got one generation that'll do something. The next generation say, that didn't work, I didn't like that, they'll try something else. So you end up with some of this ping-ponging back and forth, I
Pendulum
guess.
swinging.
Yeah.
I mean, it happens within your life too. I mean, I was on this Cole Valley end of the spectrum, and now I'm an atheist, and some people would be like, well, you swung too far because for whatever reason. I'm like, well, I'm just doing what I think is right. But so
then going from that, as far as that kind of sets the stage for the past and how you got your school career started.
Can I ask you a question before you move on, though?
You sure can.
Thank you. You mentioned you didn't have any Christian friends in high school. But demographically speaking, that's unlikely if you use a conventional definition of Christian. Like, I don't know. Nowadays, I don't know what the stat is specifically, but probably half of the United States is considered Christian. And probably it was higher in the past. So were these categorically unchristian people, as in they said, I'm not a Christian, or were they culturally Christian, but they didn't act in such a way of what you considered a Christian to be?
Good question. It turns out the suburb that I lived in had a very large Catholic church, and most of my friends belonged to families that were Catholic and only went to church on Christmas and Easter, and felt it was important to be part of the Catholic Church, but didn't have any incentive or mindset to think about it other than those holiday appearances, and it wasn't a priority in their life.
So you're kind of talking about a lifestyle. Did they not believe in God? Because you don't have to be going to church every week to be a Christian.
We didn't talk about that.
So that's what I kind of expected you to say, is that you didn't have any Christian friends, but what you really mean is you didn't have anybody that had a very intensive Christian lifestyle, or what you considered that to be.
Correct. Or had any kind of a mindset or thought of following whatever the Catholic Church tries to teach and adhere to. That wasn't in their mindset. The Catholic Church was just a 2-time-a-year thing, motivated by parents and no interest on their part.
Okay. So yeah, to me it sounds like they weren't atheists. You know, maybe they believed in God, but they were maybe like a level 2 or 3 Christian, of like a Christmas and Easter kind of person, and had some culture of it. And you were a like level 10 Christian, or trying to be. And to you, these level 2 or 3s didn't seem like Christians, but that's just a matter of perspective.
Correct. I think also, particularly in high school, when you're talking about young adult age, and these friends I'm describing, they may very well have been atheists. They may have well not even thought about it. Just God wasn't in their thinking. That was a parent thing. Twice a year holiday, dress up in your best clothes, go to church, and be seen by people.
Yeah.
There was also, I could see from a number of those families where they were members of that church for business reasons also, as far as to make financial connections and to network. Okay. So any depth or even any thought about whether there was a God or not wasn't in my friends' thinking.
Okay.
Where we were thinking about cars and girls and not God.
Like most teenagers, right?
Yeah.
You know, you can't blame them too much for that. That's just being a human being in society for most people.
Yeah. Well, and also they had an effect on me, so I wasn't that far off on their thinking either in general.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that clarification. You were about to kind of proceed with, I think, your decision to put us in.
Yeah. So I put that in context, and then fast forward to today, as far as my thoughts about your blog post and about your support website and your current position as a atheist. My perspective on parenthood was and is that you have your children and they start out being completely dependent on you. And as the years go by and they get older, you try to help them transition to be independent with their own thoughts and their own decisions and their own lifestyle, which is where you are currently. So I respect you as a young adult with your own thoughts and your own position. I do have some sadness from the perspective of my own thinking with regards to life after death, how that could possibly separate us.
You think I'm going to hell?
I don't know about going to hell, but from what I understand, as far as when Jesus sets up his own kingdom with people that want to get in there and live with him, I don't know if you will be in there, if you'd be interested.
I think that's a nice way to put it. I think you believe I won't be in there and I will go to hell.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. But it's worth saying that we don't actually talk about that very much, right? You know, our relationship has adjusted to these differences, and I personally feel very comfortable around you sharing any of my opinions. I don't really filter or censor around you. And I feel like you want me to be that way.
Correct. And we focus on disagreeing agreeably and enjoy living with and discussing things we have in common or that we're learning or interested in.
Mm-hmm. Right.
As far as you've made the decision to be an atheist based on a long background of knowing and studying the Bible and Christianity. So there isn't much I can say that hasn't been said to you in 14 years.
Right. But do you think that I am so you believe that Christianity is true, in fact, as presented by the Bible, more or less literally. Do you think I'm not smart for not believing it, or I'm rejecting it? Or like, how do you think about, do you think there's something wrong with me and that I don't believe it anymore?
A couple things come to mind. First of all, you referenced the Bible, and with some of the interviews of the past students and so forth, different opinions and different perspectives they have on different things. It just also caused me to think about, when you think of the Bible as a whole, different topics or issues in the Bible within Christianity, you're going to have a range of viewpoints or opinions on it. I enjoyed listening to somebody describe like a physical picture of that idea, where if you strung out the Bible from beginning to end, just like in a horizontal line, and you put all the different topics and issues as marks across that line, that there's going to be some places where Christianity, the range of views is like this, and you go and you have this and go like this. So it's going to go up and down with different things.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be pretty close, I think, with regards to Jesus having died and coming back to life. But you go off into other areas when people have talked about Paul or this issue and this issue, you're going to have a range.
Like homosexuality.
Yeah, you're going to have a range in Christianity. But then as far as thinking about, I just got a Zoom cloud meeting window. It says sign in. Should I just X that out?
Yep.
Hopefully I won't.
Stay on target.
Do you want to leave this meeting?
No.
Let's cancel. Sorry.
Can't have an online interaction with the parent without technical difficulties, right?
There you go. We had to get that in. Yep. Did you make that window come up on me?
No, you did that all on your own.
All right. Thinking about you, whether I think you're intelligent or rejecting or that. Well, I think you're very intelligent, and I think you're really good critical thinker. But I think something that you run into, which many people run into, and I've run into it in times of my life, is we want to seek more freedom, as far as depending on what denomination or what branch of Christianity, the issue of sin and no sin puts a boundary on us. And sometimes we're not comfortable with, we don't want that boundary for whatever reason. It's voluntary. So then we look at how to get outside of that boundary. And I think that's what sometimes causes people to think things over or experiment or whatever, as far as the concept of more freedom.
So are you saying that I'm not a Christian anymore because I want to be able to sin?
I think one of the things you're not a Christian anymore is you wanted more freedom than what you saw was in Christianity.
But that has nothing to do with whether or not I believe God is like there's a God. Like, sure,
Well,
I
it
want a
does.
different lifestyle because I don't subscribe to the lifestyle I grew up in. But there's a difference between like I don't want to live like that, and I don't agree with that part. Like you can do that with still believing there's a God. You're like, I just I want to have sex before I'm married. I want to smoke weed. I want to like whatever. Um, like that doesn't mean you have to be an atheist. Like that's kind of a separate thing. Whether or not I actually think that there's probably a God or not is kind of I feel like different than that.
I would agree with what you just said, but let me tie it back to your last video where you talked about the experiments that you conducted
Mm.
as you were searching for whether or not there was a God or not, where you mentioned that you did experiments doing things that um, that Jesus typically doesn't want us to do to see whether or not you'd be struck by lightning or the Holy Spirit would convict you. And you weren't struck by lightning and the Holy Spirit didn't convict you. So then you go down a logic tree that either it's not sin or it's not sin for me or there's no God, that line of reasoning. And I was thinking about that, and I think one of and I'm not a deep theologian and a Bible expert, but what it caused
I
me
don't
to
know
think
about that. You read it every day.
well, one of the reasons one of the things that caused me to think about is um, when I've been convicted about things that I felt Jesus thought were things that were wrong for me to do. Some of the ways I was convicted was I was still connected to God in my routine from the perspective of reading the Bible. So I might be doing something, and then all of a sudden one morning I'm reading somewhere in the Bible, and a couple sentences jump off the page and led me to feel guilty or convicted. Or I might have been praying and I felt the Holy Spirit was telling me something. Or I might have been at church on Sunday and the message that Sunday kind of hit me between the eyes. Or I might be a member of the accountability group and my fellow Christian friends help convict me. So I'm not sure if part of your experiment, part of the issue might have been that when you conducted your experiment, you might also have severed all your lines of communication, which might be one reason why you didn't hear anything.
Yeah, but yeah,
That hypothesis.
that makes sense. Part of me thinks that that's just sociology,
Psychological.
well, no, so the society factor. Like, this is what this society believes, therefore they will promote that within their groups, whether it's true or not. You just going back into the group that doesn't like that stuff and is like regularly speaking poorly about those things, of course you're going to feel like an outsider and like, oh, maybe that was bad. Like, to me, I mean, it's hard to separate, is that God or is that just what these group of people's teachings are? And like, they're trying to make you keep it dialed in. So like, they're obviously going over these things over and over and over again. But anyway, you were mentioning, you started talking, what?
I've got an idea for the next area, unless you are heading somewhere.
I'm not done with what you said already yet. You said, so all this stuff came out, you wrote the blog posts, the support groups, the interviews, blah, blah, blah. And then we kind of talked about me being an atheist and how you think about that. But what do you think about the blog post and the support group and that stuff?
Yeah, I actually had a thought with regard to that I was going to bring up with your two final questions that you close people with.
Well, don't jump the gun with those.
I'm not going to jump the gun, but you brought up one that I had in that area, and that is with the blog post and your support group. From my perspective, that is that this alumni feedback is really valuable feedback, because some of these students have been out of high school 8, 10, 11, 12 years, so they're mature, knowledgeable young adults, and some of them
not so young anymore.
Yeah, some of them like yourself going to turn 30 this year.
Yeah,
may not have that adjective anymore, but you've got mature people with mature minds in a position where they can be open and frank, because there's no consequences. They don't have to worry about school discipline or issues that, or they may just be getting ready to graduate and they want to. It's less unclouded the farther away you get.
Yeah, and not everybody has that luxury though, because there's a lot of people that aren't speaking up, that talk to me, but they're not speaking up even in the support group, because that's too risky. Their job, they might lose their job if people knew what they actually thought about Coal Valley. They might get blackballed in like the Christian school arena. They might face harassment at church. So there's not everybody doesn't have anything to lose like I do.
So I'm thinking it's probably a source of very important data, if not the most important, and an idea with your support group. If you have people such as that, one of the things that you're noticing is as people are doing this and talking, it has a healing effect, and they're starting to unload or get rid of baggage or start to feel better, and it's putting them in a better place. So I would encourage you that if you hear of people in the position that you just described, that you create an avenue where they can do it anonymously.
Some people aren't even willing to do that because they're like, somebody might know enough about me that like I can't really tell my story without somebody knowing that. And if they share it with one person, then like my whole world could explode and I wouldn't be able to like pay the mortgage.
Well, a thought I have on that is you mentioned that you've got quite a diverse, talented group of people in your support group. So you could make some kind of connection where, say, the person wants to tell a story but doesn't feel like doing it anonymously. Maybe two other people in the support group get together with him as a third and write it up as a group that could kind of make it safe.
Yeah.
If the person has something new that's important, if it's just repetition, you can somehow say, we've got more cases of this, and you could say, I've got 10 cases rather than 2. But if you need to get more into a storyline, then maybe it could be a little subgroup, small group effort, and multiple ways could keep it really anonymous.
Yeah. Cool. You were wanting to go in another direction.
So another thing I put some thoughts together on was thinking about the difference between Coal Valley Christian private schools and public schools. And some of these differences might relate to how people are experiencing Coal Valley or their perceptions, which may be somewhat normal in certain areas in non-harmful ways. I was kind of thinking that a public school is kind of focused on agnostic teaching, and particularly in secondary school. Maybe we ought to focus in on that, because a lot of your interviews, it doesn't seem like any of the alumni are having much to say or bad to say about elementary. It pretty much starts with secondary, with 7th grade.
Yeah. I mean,
particularly when the hormones kick in and sexuality starts becoming.
Well, and you start teaching about politics and lifestyles and stuff.
Yeah.
Elementary school, it's kind of
good point.
over their head.
Yeah, exactly. So in terms of secondary school, I kind of see the public school as an agnostic environment, teaching students how to live in a community where they respect each other. And I see Cove Valley being a Christian community, going a little farther, trying to teach the students how to live in a Christian community, loving each other, where that's their desire. That's the goal. Of course, there's all kinds of problems that are being discussed, but I think they even raise the bar a little higher than public school.
If you're part of the mold, if you basically look and act the way they want you to.
Correct.
If you're not that, even if it's out of your control, you might not be getting so much love at a place like Cove Valley.
Well, and that's relating to one of the messages I had for the administration also, as far as there are people leaving the school that the alumni are attesting to that aren't feeling loved and or equal and or brainwashed. And that's a problem. That's not Jesus's goal. That's not the school's goal that I understand. These are alumni that graduated years back, so it certainly tells me there was a problem. I don't know if there still is a problem. Your group will probably find that out, but there definitely was a problem in the past. And with this coming out and stating that, I would hope that the administration would acknowledge what's being said, what's being put together, and somehow in an appropriate way come up with a position statement. And if they agree that there are problems, then hopefully that position statement either talks about how they're going to go forward studying it and coming up with recommendations, or they've already got something and they've already can give a position statement, this is what we're going to change or what we're going to do different. But in that effort, I would hope that it would involve the parents, the students, the school faculty, and also possibly the students' pastors, because from what I understand, there's like 150 churches represented in Cove Valley between faculty and students. So it's covering quite a few pastors here in the Boise Meridian area. Of course, when you get 150 churches, that's when you're going to get this varying in opinions too. And where
some churches might be like, Cove Valley doesn't go far enough.
Exactly. And so you're going to have that range, right? Yeah. So you're going to have that range, and the school, of course, has to pick out what is their position, what is their point on them. And that references my idea to the parents that particularly if you're going to start a student the first time in secondary school, or your student's going to go from elementary to secondary, you're going to have to really dig into the documentation for Cove Valley School and see what all their positions are on all these different topics, because you may not agree with them or they don't align in your particular church. And if you can't agree with them and align with them, then I would think it would be best to stay away from the school.
Let's talk about that. You and I have been talking for a while about how shocking the student and parent handbook is relating to homosexuality. And I'll just, if you don't know about this or haven't seen that document or heard us talk about that in other videos, there's a biblical lifestyle section of the student and parent handbook. 2 paragraphs long. It's super vague except for one thing, which it's very specific about. It's homosexuality. And it is all about all the ways you can be expelled related to homosexuality. And it's pretty clear as day. So it says, you can be expelled if your parents are gay. Nothing to do with you. You can be expelled if you are gay, say that you're gay, profess to be gay, you can be expelled if you do not express to be gay, but you have gay sex. Or the worst, I don't know, maybe they're all bad, but like the most extreme one, you can be expelled if you condone or support homosexuality in any way. People like to say Coal Valley is not a hateful place, but how can that not be hateful? So we've been talking about that, Dad. What do you think about that?
So, first off, I have an older brother that is gay, and I love him very much. So I've been exposed to the topic a long time, starting back in 1978. But on that topic, once again, there's going to be a range in Christendom, as you can read in the news, as far as the Methodist Church is wrestling with
all over the news right now.
Yeah, there's been other denominations that have been wrestling with for 10 or 15 years. Some denominations have gay pastors. So there's quite a broad range on the topic. But I think if you're going to have a child in Coal Valley Secondary School and you see that in the handbook as a parent, your child's going to be older, so they're in secondary school, so seventh grade and sixth, they're going to be a teenager, at least 13 or older. So they're old enough to start having discussion in terms of sex and sexuality. So Coal Valley has picked a particular point on this spectrum. And as a parent and student, you need to decide whether you agree with and want to adhere to it. If not, then I would think you wouldn't want to attend, or you would enter into a discussion and see if there's any possibility that the school can change their position based on the current environment, or as civilization continues to try to get their head around homosexuality.
Yeah, but what do you personally think about this?
So you're asking my personal opinion?
Yeah, not, that's like, advice for parents in general. Like, what do you personally think about that policy?
So that policy, I read it to essentially say that the act of homosexual sex is a sin. But then I think it goes even further than that when it talks about friends and opinions and associations and family and that kind of stuff.
Or even saying that you have, professing to be gay without having sex is also grounds for expulsion.
Yeah. So that seems to me is taking quite a strong, severe, broad-arching stance.
And when we talked about it before, you said you seemed pretty upset about it, and you said if I would have never put you in that. I'm putting words in your mouth. You can kind of counter or whatever. What I basically heard you say is I wouldn't have put you in Coal Valley if I saw that in the student handbook. I don't remember seeing that. We would have jumped all over that. That would have not been okay with us because of Uncle Jim. But it's in there, and I said, I'm guessing it's probably always been there because people have in the past have been only less accepting of homosexuality.
So the only thing I can say to that is your mother and I both read the handbook, so she would have been sensitive to it also. So we're either both poor readers, which is certainly possible, or somehow we didn't get it and missed it.
Or wasn't there.
Yeah. Or as you mentioned, my thoughts, and I think everybody's thoughts, have either changed or developed. They may not have been there at all in the past, and people are just maybe starting to grapple with this as it gets more in the news and our society deals with it. Like the the military or fair hiring, fair housing, all this kind of stuff. But like I say, I've had a mindset around it, having introduced it being introduced to me by my older brother in the 70s and having to wrestle with it and what that meant between our relationship.
Yeah.
But this also relates to a couple of your past interviews where people are talking about this concept of loving the sinner but hating the sin, and how that's really not happening, that it's really hating the sinner and hating the sin, or certainly them not being equal or second class or not loved, maybe an acquaintance or
It's almost like an excuse. As long as you say that, that's like the phrase, if you say God bless them, you can say anything you want. But oh, they're a fat fuck. Oh, God bless them. Something like that. You can say something really horrible, and as long as you say that, it's okay. It's like, I love them, but I hate their sin, and I'm just going to go on like harassing them and gossiping about them and isolating them, and basically like driving them to depression and suicide.
Right. So if those people aren't feeling loved and they aren't feeling equal, that's a problem, because it turns out Christendom is full of sinners. One of the big views of the church is the best place for sinners is in the church. They ought to feel welcome. And then if they feel that there is a God and there is a Jesus and they love him and they would like to live the way he recommends, if he's the creator and has the best plan, then their heart's going to turn towards, I really want to listen to him, or why does he have that position, or what's he thinking? But in the meantime, as they're struggling with that, we're all sinning. And, even every day when you get to the minor things, what are things you don't do, there's a term for that. There's sin of commission.
Sins of omission, commission.
Yeah. Right. So if you get into the whole term, we're all sinning all the time. We're all trying to help each other get through life. And if we believe in heaven and Jesus' really neat kingdom, trying to get there. But in the meantime, like you say, people, it doesn't help for them to feel second class or not equal.
Especially for things they can't control.
Right.
That are scientifically proven to be a biological, with, homosexuality or all, non-straight sexuality. And basically every species, roughly 10% or more of them are, not straight. So when you say you're choosing that, that is just not backed up by any kind of biology, science that has ever, that's out there.
But also add to that, I think you've described one case set, but it doesn't mean that somebody doesn't have it genetically, but decides they want to be a gay. I assume there's those kind of instances also. For whatever reason, they like the lifestyle and want to join.
I think the current science explains sexuality as a spectrum. It's not like you're this or you're this. Everybody's somewhere along the way. So I don't think somebody that's 99% straight is probably going to choose to be. I mean, maybe they have, they're attracted to a man and they have sex with a man, but that doesn't make them gay. That means they had gay sex or whatever.
You could be bisexual.
That doesn't even make you bisexual necessarily. That doesn't mean that like you have these reoccurring, like I'm always feeling attraction for the same sex or whatever. But so it's hard to say like, okay, well, you're not gay, but you just chose to be gay. But also, who in their right mind would choose to be gay in a Coal Valley environment?
Well, exactly. So if they're already gay, then it's a hostile environment to go in.
No one is choosing to be gay in Coal Valley. Why would anybody want to put themselves through that? No one would.
But you bring up a good point as far as if it's a student that hasn't attended there in elementary and is considering, let's say, going to Coal Valley in the 10th grade, and they already know they're gay, you would hope they wouldn't go there. The other
Well, I would
scenario,
hope that they could go there and be themselves, and that wouldn't be a problem eventually. The way it is right now, don't go there. Like your mental health is going to struggle. You're going to be, basically discriminated against day in, day out.
well, and I think along that line, if Coal Valley would get to the state that you just described, however that would happen, you would hope the student could then go there and be gay and get a good education and feel equal and loved. But if Coal Valley still feels gay sex is a sin, and they want to go in there and change Coal Valley by being a, what would be the term, somebody that wants to lead change and be real verbal and visible,
Activists
and kind of fight them on it, that could be a problem.
Yeah. Right. What else do you have on your notes?
So going back to Coal Valley versus the public school,
Mm-hmm.
we've talked about some of this as far as living in a Christian community. The Christian community has really high, I think, wonderful ideals, but it's also hard. It's hard for a Christian school. It's hard for a Christian church. As far as we all have different people with different personalities, different issues, different topics. So it's never always smooth sailing. That's why you even have some churches split. So even though it's a great goal, it's hard, just plain hard.
Why do you think it seems harder than public school? Because they're trying to be more restrictive than public school. So it's like that. I think that it's like self-imposed. Like the fact that they're like, good living is somewhere within this range. So all of this and all of this is not okay. And it's almost like by design, they can't not, be judgmental of somebody that, in a lot of aspects might be in here, but they're also out here. They can't accept that.
Good point. I would just expand on that from the notion where I had the thought that public school is an agnostic environment and a Christian school is a Christian environment. So what that means is all of a sudden when you're creating a Christian school, then all of a sudden you bring the Bible and worship and the Bible's teaching and interpretations. So all of a sudden you have this bigger expanse of topics that create more and more places for disagreement and hurt feelings and possible anger. Whereas the public school is maybe dealing with, a circle this big. You add the Bible and the church and these other things, and the Christian school has to deal with this big a deal. So like you say, it sets them up for controversy and conflict and arguing more.
Yeah, so maybe the public school is more restricted in what they can take a position on. And because of that, they're more accepting of more different lifestyles.
Yeah. And there's less things to cover and or learn and or argue about.
Yeah, I think maybe one part of the answer for Coal Valley is like, you feel like you've got to take a firm stance on, I don't know, this much stuff. Maybe the things that, like you mentioned, there's so much range in Christian thinking. Maybe you just shouldn't take a stance on that, and therefore like be more open and let more freedom of kind of expression, and then not be so quick to judge. Because if you went from this to that, the people that are in the difference might be more safe and welcome and appreciated and loved in that environment. Like if you didn't have to take a position on homosexuality, like you took like the strongest position on homosexuality, Cole Valley. Like if you back that off at all, like why do you have to take a position on that at all? Like, you know, like we talked about, there's so many Christians that don't think that's a sin. What if you just didn't make that call for everybody? If you could change that policy right there, you would enormously impact the mental health of the LGBT kids in your school. Don't you think? Like, do you think they're like way too firm on something? Like they should loosen up and let, you know, parents and churches make their own call on that?
I think based on the problems in this whole situation that has arose, I think that is certainly a good idea to look at as far as the school administration and faculty, the parents who are also talking to their kids, and the linked pastors. That's something for them to try to tackle as a group.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of which, would you join? Would you help out as a past parent?
I would consider it.
Everybody else should do this, and I'm going to sit here and talk on YouTube.
It's a good thing I have an open mind, right?
Yeah. If you don't know, Fred does care. He just really, really likes having minimum commitments.
Yeah, and I'm not the best at thinking on my feet. I like to ponder things.
You're good on your feet. You just like to move slow on those things. Okay, so what else on your list?
Okay. So then I had some thoughts
Wait,
about...
how much of your list have we gone through? Because we could be on here for way too long.
Most of it.
Okay, cool.
But as you said that, I was thinking about picking up something else on public school versus Christian school. Another thing that enters into the dynamic is with Christian school, you also have more of a component of accountability, where you have, like within your basketball team, your teammates are trying to hold each other accountable. Your senior class is trying to hold each other accountable. The school's trying to hold yourself accountable. So there's a lot more accountability of trying to hit what the school has set as a target with their documents. Whereas in public school, I think there's less accountability, as much as you're just not causing a problem, you're not acting up, and you're not breaking any civil laws. So that creates a difference too, I think.
There's definitely like a positive component of accountability, right? Like treating people with love. You know, everybody should help everybody. You know, if somebody's being rude to somebody else, then somebody else should be like, yo, knock it off. That's not very nice. That's good accountability. But there's also bad accountability. Like the fact that Cole Valley has in the past, like, looks into, like, investigates what their students are doing in their free time away from the school, in some cases what they've posted on Facebook, and then punishing them based on that. And you know, we specifically relating to this, we were afraid they were actually in the support group, reading about these stories and then using it against current students. So, like, what's the line between good accountability and just like absolute totalitarianism?
Yeah, that causes me to think about the handbook again, as far as the school has internal issues and internal accountability and trying to help and come alongside people for moral issues. But there's also a boundary with external issues, particularly when some of the alumni are referencing issues that could be civil law issues that could be external issues. And I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not sure how some of these things, how the law translates to minors versus adults, things that happen on premise versus things that happen in the home, versus at a school event and so forth. But if with these things coming up, if this isn't addressed currently in the handbook, it's certainly a good topic for, once again, these groups of people to discuss and understand and see if they agree with it. And if they agree, good. If they don't, then can we change it? If not, then you maybe need to go somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. Another aspect of accountability, do you think the Cole Valley administration has enough accountability on them?
Well, based on your alumni's experience, at least in the past, it sounds like they haven't. Otherwise, these things wouldn't happen. So I know the hierarchy as far as different people that are involved, but I don't know what their protocol or processes are.
Yeah,
and particularly when we talk about issues where actions break over into the public civic law area. So I don't know if there's a need for better training or if there's ignorance, and particularly some of these serious sexual issues, whether they have sufficient training and or knowledge, or their handbook's out of date, or there's gaps. But it's caused problems to your alumni have stated problems.
Yeah, and protocols, following best practices, I totally agree with you. Like, I don't know if they have these. I would like to know that. I would love for somebody to point me towards those so I can see those. That's something that public schools have improved a lot on. And if I had to guess what their protocols are, they're very nefarious. The commonality between all of these horror stories is figure out about this bad thing that happened, bring them in, close the door, pray, shame the victim, and in so doing, make them so ashamed for what happened beyond what they're naturally feeling. Make them so ashamed that they'll never speak about it. And tell them, no one will believe you. It's a he said, she said situation. Do you really want to hurt that person's life? You probably asked for it. Let's be honest. And then that's how they keep everything quiet. That's how we can have all these stories and have never known about it until now. Like if everybody knew about this stuff years ago, people would have flipped. Like it would have been an outrage. There would have been a revolution like there's happening right now. Like it would have happened before. But the only way all this stuff came out into the light was I just did this thing and it just blew up. So now everybody's like, oh, wait, you had a bad experience too? Me too. Let's talk about it. And then now we're all talking to each other, and it seems like their whole protocol was like, close it up, tighten the hatches down, send them away, next, never let them, share stories. And that's how they kept everything, tranquil. That's what it feels like, and that's the pattern in the stories.
So that's a problem anytime you've got situations like that where essentially they're not opened up to the light of day and they're in the darkness, so to speak. So, a saying is, well, the handbook has a goal, the supervision of the school board, and Cole Community Church has some kind of goals and position. And some people like to say, you can expect what you inspect, which relates to protocol, which relates to protocols and procedure and data. So something's broke in this workflow or this process or whatever. If things can be under the table and in the shadows like that.
Yeah, they need to report incidences. They don't need to, they need to maintain confidentiality and privacy, to the extent that that's desired. However, they need to give all the victims, it's up to you. Like, you should do what I don't know how you handle that, but like, there needs to be a report that said X number of these types of incidents happened in the last semester, X number of these, and that needs to be public. And, there needs to be reports.
Because it caused me to remember, I do remember when we first started you in school in the orientation class, I remember the school counselor in that meeting with the parents was really adamant and really assertive, reminding the parents that it was the law that when she was counseling a student, if there was evidence of child abuse in the home, that the law bound her to report it to the authorities. So
that is inconsistently applied then.
Bingo. So if that came out that strong from the school counselor, I don't know how this other thing got sidelined and under the table. So it's kind of analogous.
Yeah.
You don't know where the incident occurred, whether it was at school or an event or at home or whatever, but supposedly if somebody knows about it, you would think it would be a similar situation.
Right. Absolutely.
It's something that might be different as if the two parties are both minors, and I'm not sure how that works with the law and so forth.
Right. Well, I would imagine it still needs to go to the law. It's just, the charges that get brought forward might be different, or I don't know.
Yeah, that's where it's above my pay grade. Another idea I had going too is I wanted to, as far as, was I happy that I sent you guys to Coal Valley? Of course, I'm not when I hear your opinion later, but when you graduate, I was happy you went there, and I had some examples that kind of reinforced why I was happy. It turns out my wife and your mom died when you were in the 5th grade, and Kelsey, my daughter, was in the 2nd grade. And the church helped me a lot as a single parent, and the school helped me a lot as a single parent also. To give you some examples, which I'm not sure would have occurred in a public school, one of the woman teachers in the junior high came to our house one Thanksgiving and spent most of the day showing Kelsey how to make Thanksgiving dinner. And then once we had our food on the table, then she went back to her house and had Thanksgiving with her family. And then also there were two high school teachers of yours, 2 men, that took you hunting and trap shooting on different times, which you enjoyed that. And early on, after your mom's death, the high school girls volleyball team took us on as a serving focus, and the girls on the high school volleyball team helped me out with babysitting. And it was things like that
I remember
that really helped me. So I appreciated that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm ready to go on to your last 2 questions.
Before that, real quick, I think it's a great point. Like, there's a lot of great things that happen.
To draw this thing out, you already said it was too long.
Yeah, you don't get the last word. I'm the interviewer.
There you go.
It's a great point that some people have, criticized or not criticized, but they've, read my blog post and been like, but it wasn't all bad, was it? And I was like, no, of course it wasn't all bad. Like, these are bad things. Like, these are things that, to me, looking back, make it a bad school. But a lot of good things happened, my day-to-day experiences. And actually, like, I was a very privileged kid in that environment. As a white male athlete, honor student, I was popular. I pretty much had it all. And that's why I said, like, at the beginning of the post, like when I left, I loved it. And I do have so many great memories. It's only afterwards where I remember, like, that is a bad way to raise somebody. You do all kinds of damage to the way they think, what they choose, like what precedents you set, what, baggage you load them up with. It's a really bad way to raise somebody. But, do you at all, you spent six figures on Coal Valley, maybe even over 1.5, or, maybe it was like, it might've been 150,000 all told. I don't even know. It's definitely over 100 though, right?
Yeah.
Looking back, hearing these things, a lot of good things happened. Looking back now, you realize a lot of bad things happened. How do you feel about spending that kind of money?
I still feel good about spending that kind of money from the perspective of my initial goals. That my perspective is that you graduated
from doing harm to myself, basically.
Yeah, you graduated from high school with a clean slate as a young adult, heading out into the world, learning more things, developing your own ideas and opinions, but you didn't have any baggage on your back, so to speak, at that point.
There's got to be a cheaper way to do that. That's so much money. That could have paid for Kelsey and I to go to get college degrees, like 3 college degrees at Boise State each. Like, you think, is that the cheapest way to kind of have that desired effect that you stated?
I don't know. I haven't studied it broadly or researched it, which I could have did, but I didn't. But it was the idea that came to my mind based on how I grew up and what I thought would be an improvement.
Yeah. Okay. Last 2 questions. You've already touched on them a lot, but
I just had an idea on your last question.
Okay.
You mentioned, would there be a more economical way to do it? Well, I think one of the a more economical way to do it would be homeschooling, but there's pluses and minuses on that. But even with homeschooling, school districts have become pretty helpful on that now, where like homeschoolers can send their kids to the high school to be on the golf team or the football team. So the public schools have integrated in homeschoolers, and you could tie that in some with church. So maybe that mixture might be a lower cost, better fit for some families too.
Mm-hmm.
Particularly technology, just like college, where, they're trying to use technology where all the students can hear the best lectures from the best lecturers, kind of thing. So homeschoolers, just brainstorming, thinking out loud, but
yeah.
Technology, I think, would be helping that quite a bit.
Yep. Cool. Okay, so you've already said a lot of what you want the administration to kind of consider, but if you would kind of sum that all up, what's your message to the administration? And then, summing up, your message to prospective parents that are thinking about putting their kids at Coal Valley.
Okay. In summing up, some of it will be repetition, but this will be a summary. One of the things we talked about is, I think the alumni feedback is really important and valuable based on their age and maturity. It's evident that, at least in the past, students graduated feeling not loved and or equal and or brainwashed, and that's a problem. And with regards to brainwashing, seems like a better solution would be, if you're going to talk about a topic, say this is the spectrum of the topic in Christianity, like we mentioned, and this is the position that the school has. and this is why we have this position. But you have brains, and you guys need to think about it and make your own decision. So not make a point presentation, but a spectrum presentation. Let's see. So I hope that the school will acknowledge all this effort and this support group and develop a position statement. I hope that there can be some synergy gained between the school faculty, administration, teachers, parents, and linked pastors. Going from there to the parents, particularly with regards to the secondary school, it's now become evident that you really need to read that handbook closely and have a discussion, the husband talking with the wife, and there's a range of
husband or wife and wife.
Bingo. But once again, in Christian, there's a range as far as thoughts on the relationship between the two spouses, as far as apparently some think one ought to be a doormat, and many don't, so that's an issue. But anyways, the parents need to look at the handbook, talk about it with their young adult, and decide whether you can agree and support it. And if not, enter into discussion, is there a way to change it? If not, then look at other alternatives. And in that handbook and in secondary school, it's particularly important to pay attention to sexuality. A lot of these alumni are talking about issues that are related to sexuality. And more as feminism and wives being doormats. Those are issues that need to be looked at and addressed.
Cool. And to the administration, put Fred Crow on your committee list. He'll be there.
Volunteered, huh?
Yep. Voluntold. All right. Thanks, Dad. Good chat. I enjoyed it. And I think this will be good for other people to hear too.
I hope so.
Okay. See you later.
All right. Bye.
Bye.